Definitely super excited to record another session devoted to my one of my favorite books, top 5 favorite books of all time, The Four Agreements. How are you, Daphne?
Fantastic. And I'm very excited. This is part two. We got it through our episode last week where we got through two agreements.
We got through 2.
Two of the four. We're talkers. It was a very valuable conversation because we also did the setup, right? Essentially, that this conversation is really around the unconscious agreements that we make, that we sort of are born into in many instances. And Don Miguel Ruiz comes back around. He says, hey, look, maybe you might want to consider having some intentional agreements. So today we are going to talk about the other two agreements, which you'll have to just keep tuning into the episode to find out what those are.
Welcome to Life, the ultimate choose-your-own adventure game with hosts Cliff Ravenscraft and Daphne Scott. Join this dynamic duo as they explore the profound concept of life as a thrilling adventure, blending ancient wisdom and modern psychology. Embrace the joy of living with presence, creativity, and playfulness. It's time to navigate the game of life together. Are you ready to play? Let the adventure begin.
Daphne, I'm definitely ready to play.
I am too, and to navigate this adventure together. That's
together.
What stood out to me today. Navigating and together stood out to me today. Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. It's always interesting to find out what we intentionally choose to focus in on or find ourselves drawn to. Let's say that, because maybe that wasn't as intentional. It was just kind of just happened.
Drawn to, and we always have the best of intentions that we're drawn to the things that are going to be helpful to us. It's all helpful, I guess. There's learnings, right? Even when we're drawn to things that maybe are not seemingly as helpful. Seemingly is helpful. We get.
But if we were to avoid assuming things helpfulness.
Nice. So Cliff has just segued to agreement number 3. Very nice. That was very smooth.
Did you like that?
I really did, actually. I did. I also were getting really good at the beginning of the show of just, you're so good at catching like the phrase. It's like, okay, we're moving. So I just am appreciating you now. So yes. So the third agreement is make no assumptions. That's how I phrased it. He might have said it differently, but it's basically make no assumptions. And just to recap, we did it a little bit at the top of the show, but where we were last week is we talked about the first two agreements, which were in no particular order. Don't take things personally. That one always stands out to me. That was the second one. The first one was be impeccable with your word. So we talked about those last week. And again, this is really about being intentional about what we subscribe to. That's how I like to say it. What we subscribe to, the beliefs that we have. This is the world that you and I play in all day long with our clients and with ourselves, by the way. Catching our own thought viruses. What are the stories we tell ourselves? What are the things that are helpful? What are the things that are less helpful? How are we arguing for our limiting beliefs? That's essentially what this book is about. And I think why it was so, I'm going to use the word riveting, riveting for each of us when we read it, separate times, but when we read it many years ago, and why it had such an impact on us. So today we're going to talk about make no assumptions.
Make no assumptions. What stands out for me in making assumptions is this idea that I know what someone else is thinking and what their intentions are. I know what they believe. I know what they meant when they said this. I know how they're feeling. I know what's going on in their world. I have all sorts of assumptions I could be making.
Don't you? I do too. And have you ever noticed how they're not necessarily the most savory of assumptions? They're always the worst. Why hasn't she called me? Why hasn't she texted me? Why didn't she call me back? It must have been something I said. Maybe I acted badly the last time we were together. Maybe I said something that was offensive. Maybe she doesn't want to be around me. I mean, the stories are never, and I think this is one of the most fun things that I caught on to in my life at one point. The stories, for some reason, are never that positive or helpful. They're always sort of in this weird vein of, I would just say negative. They're never like, wow, maybe something really great happened in her life and she's just really busy or whatever.
I see where you're coming from, and I definitely see that. But ironically, some of the first things that came to my mind are making assumptions about somebody's good intentions when maybe they're not there.
Yeah, great example.
So the one thing that stands in my mind as a coach
Yeah.
There's all sorts of values that I have, such as loyalty and showing up on time, being impeccable with your word, staying true to your agreements. There's all of these things that I just think this is the way life is. It is the way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I learned a while back, and sometimes I relearn
Sure. Not me. I
that
learned it the first time. It never repeats itself.
not everyone has the same values that I do. Not
What?
necessarily that mine are the right values, granted, but still, sometimes I do make assumptions that when somebody says, I'm going to be at such and such place at such and such time, I can't wait to see you. I'm looking forward to means that this person is going to protect that time, value that time, and will be there.
Yeah.
And the number of times where it's like, "Oh my gosh, Cliff, I have no idea what happened. Somehow it just didn't make it to my calendar. It completely slipped my mind." And, the
Right.
number of times is like, "Oh, wait a second." So all of those phrases that you said, I made assumptions that you meant them the same way that I would have meaning behind them if
Yeah.
I were saying those same words to you. Which
Yeah.
means, like, I not only put it on my calendar, I set a reminder to email me 2 days before, the day before, 2 hours before, and 5 minutes before. I've got little ticklers in my CRM that says, "Hey, notification, ping, ping, ping." I'm really looking forward to this. I am super excited about it, and I can't wait to see you there. I I sometimes I just make the assumption that people are viewing these agreements the same way that I do, or using the
Yeah.
phrases. And what I learned is that when somebody says, "I'm really looking forward to this. I can't wait to see you," my assumption could be that they mean it the same way that I would.
Right.
And what I've learned is that's not always the case. Sometimes that's just a polite phrasing that has little more meaning than "have a nice day."
Yeah. And they could mean it in the moment, and who knows what happens 2 or 3 moments later for them, right? Like, I hear you. Like, it just the way that you would say those words has a certain level of meaning to you, and they may not subscribe to that same meaning that has some reinforcement to their actions.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and that's what I'm getting at. So
Yeah. It's really
I
great.
I definitely am familiar with making negative assumptions about people's intentions, but sometimes I make assumptions about people's good intentions.
Yeah.
And what I've learned through a lot of unmet expectations is that it's best to stay curious and ask questions and have clear and open dialogue.
Yes. Yes. I completely agree. Let me give another example came to me around I don't know if this is around people's good intentions, but it's certainly about the way we imply or layer on a meaning. I guess I'll say it that way. Because I think assumptions and meaning kind of work together, kind of the similar things. I remember in, work, saying to someone like, wow, you know what? I really appreciate your hard work on this. And I remember having one of my bosses say that to me, and me think literally the thought came to my head, it wasn't hard at all. Like, thanks. I'm like, I didn't find anything about that hard. It took me like 30 seconds, So there's just these ways that we sort of layer on, I'm sure he was appreciative, but just layer on sort of more of the meaning to it,
Yeah.
from our own perspective, right? So it's kind of an assumption underneath there. Yeah.
Something that you're saying, and I don't know how this ties into this conversation, but it just came up for me, so I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
I have something where people make an assumption about me almost every week. And
That's all.
almost every week. I jump onto calls with people randomly just to connect, network, say hello, how things are going. And every week
Are
I'm
you so
meeting
busy?
I that's exactly it. "Hey, Cliff,
I know you're so
I
busy.
appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. I'll let you go." And I'm like, "Wait a second. You know how busy I am. Who's been talking? I wanna know, where are you getting
Yeah.
this information from?"
Yeah, isn't that great? I had also one of my supervisors say to me like, "Well, I don't want you to work on this because I know your plate's already full."
Mm.
And this gets even deeper. I'm going to go even deeper. I don't know where this fits into this conversation either, but I'm going to get even deeper into this. There may have been feedback that I could make up a couple stories. One, there may have been feedback that he was withholding. Maybe he had watched me drop the ball on a couple projects. I don't think that was true in this instance because I don't recall that occurring. And there's also this place where we start taking too much responsibility for someone's schedule. And I felt like that was what he was doing, like taking responsibility for my world in some way. And so I call it like a hero move, like heroing, like, oh, I know you've got so much on your plate, so I don't want you to take this on. I'm like, yeah, but I really want to take this on. Like, why don't you find something I don't want to do and take that off my plate and let me do this other thing then? Let's have that conversation, which was a conversation we had, by the way. So, there's ways that we make these assumptions. And I think maybe maybe it's some of the social mores that we can fall into or patterns that we fall into, but it is fascinating. And it's interesting what people are wanting to imply with that. I was trying to think if I've said that to someone like, oh, I know you're so busy. I don't know if it's a way that we sort of try to like diminish ourselves.
Well, in some ways, I think if I unpack that phrase, I know how busy you are. I think in our culture today, some people praise busyness.
Oh, I would say, yeah.
and in some way, it's some way of acknowledging, I know that you are a productive, meaningful member and contributing person in our society at such a level of that demands your busyness at all times. And what they're really saying at the heart of it is, I just want to let you know that I really respect your time.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that's what's underneath it. Yeah. Again, we're making a bunch of assumptions.
But that's an assumption. So one of the things is to clarify and confirm.
Yeah.
Hey, so let me ask you a question. What I'm hearing you say is, I know how busy you are and you want to respect my time. And it sounds to me like you're looking to get off the call because you're afraid of overextending yourself into my free time or my next project. Is that a concern for you, or is it possible that that is a polite way for you saying, hey, Cliff, I really need to go. I just want to confirm because I'm interested. I have plenty of time. I'd love to continue our dialogue if that's of interest to you. But I just want to confirm, what is it what is the meaning behind, how busy I am and that you'll let me go? What is it that you're saying here? That's a way to clarify and confirm.
Yeah. And, I'm just freaking out because you're giving me way too much attention. And we're also bumping up against a thing that I don't want to face into. So I need to get going. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, making assumptions, right? Like,
Yeah.
and there are things that we say, and I think this is really also, this is going to come back to, I think I can lean this back into being impeccable with our word too. Like, we're bringing up sort of these common phrases. Like, I think we could, and I'm just thinking about myself now, like, I wonder what sort of patterned phrases I have where I'm not impeccable with my word. Like, I'm falling into just a trap of that, just saying things to say things and, falling into sort of being not very intentional with what I'm saying. Habits. Yeah. Interesting.
I know that I have certain patterns of language that
yeah.
go unexamined.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the things that is incredibly rewarding for me is the amount of content that I create.
Yeah.
And I also get an opportunity many times. Well, I always have the opportunity, but I take the opportunity multiple times to go back and listen to what I've just recorded. And I edit out all of the things that were unnecessary.
Oh man, isn't that a great exercise?
It is. Well, it is an incredibly powerful exercise. And if you listen to me, if you go back and listen to this episode, any of our previous episodes, we're streaming this live. I have no script. I'm never thinking ahead of time, what am I going to say during this live stream? But you don't hear me tripping over my words a lot. You don't hear me saying and all these other things. And it is because I have thousands of podcast episodes where I recorded for, let's just say, an hour and 45 minutes. And when I was finished editing that podcast episode, it's an hour and 5 minutes. which
And
means
40 of it was going,
there was 40, it wasn't 40 minutes of but it was 40 minutes of me saying the same thing in circles over and over again.
yeah.
And I'm like, I think they got it the first time. And if not, they could hit rewind. By all means, let's cut this 17 minutes of me restating the facts again.
Well, Don Miguel does not say this in his book about being impeccable with your word. I would imply, and this applies to myself as well, we could do with probably less talking.
Daphne, do you know how much I love and both fear the idea of never speaking anymore?
Yeah, sure.
I'm
It
not
has its
kidding.
utility. Yeah.
There's so much in my mind at this point in this stage in my life. I have some level of gut feeling, intuition that tells me there is absolute freedom from having any opinions that I express to others.
For sure. I can totally get with that. I mean, the show, we said freedom, right? Like, like how enjoyable is it to be free of opinion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm a content creator. And what am I out there if I'm going to create content? Everything is my opinion on an experience or a
Sure.
this or a that. And I do love and I see value in showing up and communicating. And I think it has a potential for incredibly positive and profound impact and influence in people's lives. And so while I am compelled to create content and share what I've learned and what I believe and what my agreements are, and in sometimes in a desire to potentially influence other people's agreements and beliefs and things of that nature. But at the same time, I'm like, I do find myself being less conclusive is what I would say. I'm
Yeah.
drawing less conclusions and I'm acknowledging more and more this is what I currently experience as my thoughts and feelings on this matter. I'm not saying it's accurate. I've held different views in the past. I currently have some strong feelings of certainty about this now,
Mm-hmm.
but they're just as strong as what I now to view before not so accurate assumptions. And
Yeah.
so I don't know where I will be on this subject a year from now, but this is where I am today. And
Thank goodness.
it's a lot of words to be impeccable with your word.
It is a lot. It is a lot. Well, and let me I'm going to lean into this because I think it's so helpful. I think there's when we talk about opinions, and by the way, we are drifting back into agreement number one, being
I know.
impeccable with the word, because I do think it fits in with assumptions, right? So
It does.
one assumption you would be making is that what I say is the right thing for everybody. You do not subscribe to that, neither do I.
No.
When we talk about sharing experience and opinion, I think also in this, and I think this is also part of the book, it's sort of what's the intentionality? Like if I feel that I have something to share that is an opinion based on my experience, because I feel that I am here to serve a certain person that would benefit from it, i.e., I work with people pretty much who are burned out. That is my thing, is working with people who are burned out, overextended, overcommitted, working in an organization, typically in a leadership role. That is my thing. I have been called and put on this planet to do that. That has been true for the last 20 years of my life. So, if I have something to say or provide that is of service to that person, then it is worthy of me, probably, even though I recognize it's an opinion. Now I have science, you and I both do our homework and we have science and we study things and we read. Nevertheless, I'm typically speaking from my own experience, as are you. And my goodness, hopefully that would change, because I can confidently tell you, and this is where my background as a scientist is helpful. I can confidently tell you that the things that were talked about 20 years ago, things have advanced, they have progressed. Thank goodness. Therefore, so has my thinking, and my how I see the world has too, as I know it has for you. So yeah, I would hope that there would be some intentionality and thoughtfulness around, who I was 5 minutes ago is not who I am now.
Yeah.
And the world has changed drastically, even in the last day, probably, but certainly in the last 20 years. So I think what we're talking about here is the intentionality behind that. And I feel as though in my life there could be a lot of mindless chatter, right? A lot of just having an opinion on everything, whether it is of service to myself or others, and how intentional and impeccable am I being with my word. And I think that's sort of the difference, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, between doing it mindlessly. Yeah. So I'm really thankful that you create the content that you create.
No, I
I'm
am.
really grateful for all of
I
that.
am. I am as well.
And
And where it
let me
runs
add
in.
this.
Go
I
ahead.
also know, Cliff, that you also have a commitment to do it when you feel inspired. Right. So something has, you're shifting, your energies have been shifting as of late. You're getting up early, you're shifting again, which you do so beautifully, into another realm for yourself. So, you're going down this other path. I don't know that you'll stay committed to creating content. I think you said for the month of May, you're going to do one
Yeah.
piece of content, right? And then who knows what'll happen. So, I think there's intentionality behind that as well, which I think is really valuable. So that's my opinion.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else that we need to say about making assumptions? Don't make assumptions.
I don't think so. I think it's really I think the solution, the antidote on that one is really asking questions, taking the time, and probably this is the other place, taking the space and the time to consider and then to go back and ask questions. And I think people also have the rule that they think they need to do it in real time. And sometimes you don't. You may be thinking about a conversation you had hours ago or a day prior and go, now that I'm thinking about that, I'm not really clear what that person meant, or I'm not confident about what I was making up that they meant. I need to go back and find out and
Yeah.
ask some questions. So curiosity is, I think it's the antidote for a lot of things, but for sure that. Yeah.
There is one other thought that just occurred to me as a coach. One of the things that I can say is don't make assumptions comes in really handy for me in making the most efficient times when I spend one-on-one coaching with people or in group coaching sessions.
Yeah.
And this is a mistake that I've made number of times in the past. I still occasionally fall into this trap, not nearly as much as I used to, but that is where somebody will ask me a question and they say a simple phrase and it's a question, and I have an immediate assumption about why they're asking that question.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This
And
is
then
so
I
good.
immediately start answering that question. And sometimes I can get into a little bit of a preamble or a monologue for just a moment. And 7 or 8 minutes later, and I said, okay, now what comes up for you when I share that? Well, the first thing that comes up is that's not exactly what I was asking.
Yeah.
I'm like, ah!
Perfect. Yes. I want to build a question that I ask people when they ask me a question often. And I learned this just from leading groups of people when I was in leadership positions. Someone would say like, well, what do you think will happen with our, they're doing with payroll, right? What's going to happen with our care managers payroll or something? And I would start to answer and I'd be like, wait a second. And I'm like, what makes you ask? Like, where's the question coming from? And I will tell you, in most instances, they really weren't that curious about what was happening with that person. They was for themselves. If what happens to them is that going to happen to us, sort of thing, happen to me. So yeah, what makes you ask is a good clarifier to know like what's underneath or behind the question, so that you can answer it more within that context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I like what makes you ask is a great question. And one of the things that I do is I oftentimes will reflect the question and
Yes.
say, is this what you mean by that?
Yeah.
So I say the question, but I speak it back. What I'm hearing you're asking is, and I reflect it back to them in the way that I perceived it.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
they're
So they
like,
can hear
no,
it.
they're like, no, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is this. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, got it. So what you're asking is, and then I rephrase it the way that now I'm perceiving it, and they say, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm like,
So good.
let's go down that path.
Questions driven from sincere curiosity are just, I mean, you talk about being on the big adventure. I think it's like the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The quality of your life will be determined by the quality of your questions.
Yes, exactly. Why is this happening to me? Probably lower quality.
Yeah.
Probably. Okay. So that's
Fourth agreement.
Yeah. Fourth agreement. Do your best. I have so much energy around this agreement.
Tell me
So
why.
much. Okay. what comes up for me, first of all, do your best. And I started putting this through the filter, and he does say this, and he does point this out in the book subtly, but well, not so subtly. He makes a phrase about it, a sentence about it. But, the best that you may have today, it may not be the same tomorrow. So many things can shift in our world and in our, internally and externally, that what may be your best today may not be your best tomorrow, or may not feel like it. And, I have seen this in my own life. I never, until probably 7 years ago, would have thought that that I had perfectionistic tendencies. I would never have put myself in that bucket. And they don't show up all the time, but they show up in certain places. And this is probably true for many people. Nevertheless, I would get very frustrated with myself. I gave myself zero grace. And I just hadn't caught on to it, and how I started catching on to it was I had this very black and white thinking. Like, this thing has to be done this way, and my schedule has to be set up this way. I have to do this at this certain time. And if that doesn't happen, well, it's over. My day is ruined. And I just started catching it. I think I was catching it more because I was getting frustrated. I kept noticing this frustration pattern. Like, what is that about? So anyhow, and what I realized was that, one day would go maybe pretty close to how I had planned it. And I may have had more energy that day to keep up with the activities that I had planned, or the time blocks. I don't know if you've experienced this, but the times that I had things blocked to do it. And then the next day that time would show up, and I'd be like, I don't feel like doing any of that at all. I have no energy to put into this. As a matter of fact, yesterday it felt really good to do that. And today I don't even want to look at that project. I don't have any specific examples. Oh, well, one was like playing the guitar or something. And I'd be like, I don't even feel like playing the guitar today, or playing my drums today, or whatever I was doing. So, doing what I got in touch with was that I had this perfectionistic tendency, and that doing my best one day was not going to look like it was going to the other day. And then there would be moments when maybe I was tired because I had a full day the day prior, and I needed more rest. And this is where the unfriendliness of this whole thing showed up for me, Cliff, was that I would not be gracious with myself. I would not give myself that moment of rest or recovery. And then I really became a lunatic. So I think this commitment for me really spoke more around giving ourselves grace, around how, and then we'll get to there's another part to this that really resonates with me too. But, the first part of it was like giving ourselves some grace around, what it feels like today might not feel like it feels tomorrow.
Yeah, the first note that I had wrote down about this is the fluidity of what our best is.
Yes.
And that's what you're
Yes.
speaking to, is the fact that our best is going to be, and it's not just day by day, it's moment by moment in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yes.
Our best could be shifted because of a triggered reaction to an email or a text message.
Yeah.
It's our best in that moment shifts
Yes.
based upon our state. Now, obviously, as we continue to progress and grow and raise in our consciousness and our ability to control our emotional state, sometimes our best improves over time, but it does shift. It does change. In my whole idea of enlightenment today is enlightenment isn't some level that you achieve one day and now I'm enlightened and I walk the earth as this enlightened being. No, that there's a shift. There's this, you go up and down on this map of consciousness, and wherever you are on that map, that is going to shift what best looks like.
Yes.
And the question is given where I am in this moment, which is based upon the conscious and unconscious agreements that I've made, and given the stimuli from the outside circumstance and the conditioned and or conscious meaning that is associated to this, I want to right now make an agreement. I will do the best I can with what I currently have to work with.
Yeah.
And today, that may look lousy compared to where I was yesterday if I was faced with the same situation from a different level of consciousness. But this is right now, I'm currently in this level of consciousness, and I'm going to do my best with it. It's just not going to look pretty compared to yesterday.
Exactly. And welcome to being human.
Yes.
And oh, go ahead.
And the other point is that You called it give yourself grace, and the way that I would define the same thing that you're saying is absolutely make a commitment to avoid all self-judgment.
Yes. Yes. And criticism, self-criticism, because that's what absolutely would come up for me.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
100%.
and it ties back to that opening chapter, the book of the law,
Yeah.
and the fact that we're being self-domesticated.
Yes.
We are punishing ourselves for the things that we are doing and not living up to certain standards, and it's like, yeah, just for me, always do your best is a reminder of what you said, is to give yourself that grace, extend that grace. I'm always doing the best I can with everything that I have to work with. And I just want to let go of all self-criticism, all self-judgment.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. That's exactly it. And so that was the practice, became more and more the practice and to see it. And, to your point about just taking on just agreements, right? Being domesticated. I also learned very quickly that that never being self-critical never helped me do anything. When I
Never.
got it, it never helped anything. If it would have helped, I would have nothing to work on, right? Because I'd been criticizing myself forever. So that doesn't help. Okay. Now I want to dive into the other part of this agreement
Okay.
because the word do is in it. And he starts to bring this up in the book.
Mm.
This is interesting. So, doing your best. And he says in the book, he says, doing is an action. This is what makes us feel happy. And, I caught sort of the other side of this about how, and actually it's kind of ironic because we sort of started the show out this way, right? Like that we being busy, right?
Mhm.
Getting a lot of things done. I mean, how much time do we spend talking about being productive? Well, you and I probably not as much as more anymore, but I spend a lot of time with clients around it. Being productive, how much productivity, how many things we can get done in a day, getting the big projects done. And I don't feel like I can get that big projects done because I'm caught up over here and there's not enough time. And so I started thinking about this. I'm like, this is what makes us feel happy. And I started to reframe it and I put a should in there for a second. So like it should be what makes us feel happy, right? Like being able to take action around the things that are important to us, around the things that bring vitality to our life or that are a part of us being vital in life. So I'm just kind of putting this out there. Like I really got caught on this one. I'm like, okay, how is he really applying this? And I got to sort of an answer on it, but I thought this would be really important to talk about because we can emphasize, I feel like in our culture, the doingness can be overemphasized over what I would call the beingness.
Yeah, that
If that
because
makes sense.
because when I hear anything that says, okay, it is the doing that that brings happiness. And
Right.
I'm like, no, well, my what comes up for me is happiness is a way of being.
Yes.
It's a natural essence. It's a natural state.
Yes.
And whether it's love, joy, peace, and happiness is wrapped up in a lot of those things for me. So that's why I think of happiness. And I know some people give different definitions to happiness, but for me, it's
Yeah,
like
sure.
happiness isn't attained because of something that I've done. Actually, the lack of happiness is usually something that I believe and a meaning that I'm associating to something in my outside world that I believe is keeping me from being happy, which is actually living in true alignment with my true essence.
Yes. Okay. So I love the word essence because as I thought through this, and he does get to it. So, stay with me. But as I think about this, I'm like, okay, the essence, like my doing when I'm aligned, right? When I'm doing the things that I find joy in anyway, that are a part of my essence, the doing really, I mean, talk about flow, the doing just occurs. There's not efforting, there's not a lot of, well, what I would say is striving. Maybe efforting isn't the right, but there's not a lot of striving attached to it. And what he finally does get to, and help me keep reframing this. What he finally does get to is that the doing happens simply because we love the doing, not because we expect an outcome. And I have found in my own life, where I was taking an action and doing things because I expected something, i.e., I wanted someone's approval. I wanted the money. I wanted someone's, approval would be a good one. I wanted to be in control of something. I wanted the power, put whatever stamps on it you could. The point being that the doing that was being done wasn't from a place of what I would call presence. It wasn't from a place of it's simply wanting to come through me, and this is just my essence coming through. So I'm putting a lot of he does not say any of this in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
So as I hear that, one of the things, so this afternoon I was sitting down doing the meditation on the Tao Te Ching. So I'm going back through. There's an insight timer. If you're a premium subscriber, they have a course. It's an 83-day course on the Tao Te Ching.
Fun.
And it has the version, the translation from Stephen Mitchell that it uses, by the way.
There we go.
And the third saying ends with this one line: practice not doing, and everything will fall into place. And so the idea is the art of non-doing. And it's not saying don't go out and do anything, but
Right.
don't force it. Don't,
Yes.
don't, in your word, effort it. But instead get into a flow state of absolute a blissful acceptance of what is, and in your excitement and energy, do from that. And then I had a note, not from the Tao Te Ching, but something else. It was actually for this particular note in the 4 agreements. I wrote this down: detachment from outcome. While it's good to have goals, doing your best means focusing on the effort rather than being overly attached to the outcomes. Now, I want to say here, not effort in efforting,
Yeah.
but it just basically says, okay, number one, the 4th agreement isn't always do.
Right.
It's just always do your best. And so the way that I'm going to frame it as I think about this, because you and I are on the same pages, we don't want to get into this, caught up into the rat race of the do, always do.
No.
So
It's perfect, actually, because that's what it starts to feel
it
like.
starts to feel like do. But here's the situation. It's when you are going to do something, when you are in action, always do what comes natural and is your best.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. I love it. I just had this. I was practicing my drumming today, and I just had this. It just popped in my head when you said that. So I'm learning something new. So I'm not real good at it at the moment, right? And so I'm practicing and practicing. And if I get really caught up in the doing side of that, like I've got to do this part well. I've got to learn this part. I've got to do it. Like you can feel the efforting in that, and imagine what happens to my body. There is no way I'm going to play that. And it's like this funk, and today it was like this funk beat. There's no way the more tense that I become in the doing, and I think it's a perfect example. Like this was what was coming to my mind as you were talking, like that constriction that starts to happen. Like there will be a physical manifestation through that instrument. Like, I'll never get it if I don't relax. And I think that's, really learn to breathe with that, move with it, get into the flow. And I think that's true with everything in our life.
Yeah.
You can be successful, I think, to some degree, but not at the level of, when we talk about sort of the level of ease of our consciousness that we really can get into over time. And I think from a sustainable perspective, when we're really constricted like that and just focus on the doing, just focused on the checklist, just, more. There's almost like it feels like an addiction quality to that to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I really wanted to break this, kind of unpack this even more, because, and he does say that in the book, right? And releasing ourselves from expectations. And this is one of the things, even in leadership and business, that really, and I'm sure you see this too. I mean, when you think about what it takes to create a certain outcome in your business and my business, at anyone's business, it is thousands of things that need to come together all at the same time to create, to let that vision come forth. So let those dollars land where they land. And I think that's part of, doing our best. We'll always do our best. We'll give our best effort and recognize that oftentimes things are also out of our hands in many ways.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And the fun part is that there are two sides of my internal dialogue that want to argue a little bit for the personal excellence and
Yeah.
don't do anything, it's like, no, do amazing, do
Yes.
outstanding, over deliver, put bring your blood, sweat, and tear into it. And then the other one is just trust the flow of the universe and do what feels like a great effort
Yes.
that is in flow with your energy, and evaluate your results, learn and grow from that, and see where your energy takes you. And I will tell you that inside of me, both dialogues are still there.
Yeah.
And they are sometimes at war with one another, and yet there's another dialogue within me that says, "Wait a second. You both have great, wonderful, valid points of view, and from my perspective, I think there's a way that both of you are right, and you could integrate with one another if you just stop disagreeing with each other."
And I agree with both sides. I absolutely, when it comes to doing all we can, like for our performance, right? When it can, like just doing this podcast, like I want us to do a great podcast. We'll put the effort into the audio quality and the branding and the ideas and what we're talking about. And and I love it. So there's that. I love doing it. I want to say more about this too. And why not? Where I think anybody can get trapped, self included, is if I start expecting an outcome.
Yep.
If my doing is only happening because I expect something in return. And that I think is the danger. So I am full on about give your best performance. Always, give it all you got, whatever that is on that day. Do the best that you can. Set yourself up for success. It's when striving gets attached to it and that we think that it is going to, it becomes our identity, which I think is what happens when we get attached to an outcome. That is where I think the danger lurks,
Yeah.
for our overall well-being. I really do. Yeah. So do
I
your
love it.
best.
I love it. Here's what I wrote in summary in my notes. In essence, this agreement, always do your best, is a commitment to personal excellence and integrity. It's
Yeah.
about giving every task, interaction or challenge. Wait, what's it say? It's about giving it. I wrote this a long time ago. It's it's about giving every task, interaction, or challenge your full effort and presence, while also being compassionate and understanding with yourself, recognizing that your best can vary dependent on circumstances. It promotes proactive, positive attitude towards life, ensuring that you live without regrets.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's so good. Yeah. And if you have some regrets, those are learning too.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So do you have anything else you want to say on this
No, I think we're
agreement?
good. I
Yeah.
do want to point out the fact that there was a follow-up book that was written a couple years later, and I got the audio book and the Kindle version of that as well. Listen to it. What I can tell you is I was in San Diego in 2021 when I listened to the Fifth Agreement for the first time, but I was walking through the streets of downtown San Diego and I listened to all of the four agreements with Peter Coyote, who's doing the narration. Absolutely brilliant narrator, by the way. Also narrated the Fifth Agreement. And what I can tell you is listening to them back to back, I felt like I was re-listening to the four agreements all over again because in this book, he recaps the four agreements and does
Okay.
so very thoroughly, such that if you only read the Fifth Agreement, you wouldn't be missing a lot. But I just want to point out that the Fifth Agreement is be skeptical, but learn to listen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he talks about matter. Here's what I wrote: challenge beliefs. Be skeptical about the narratives and beliefs that you have internalized over the years. Many of these beliefs might not be true and might not be beneficial. Question everything. I have adopted this, Daphne. I question everything.
I was
Instead
gonna say,
of
I like how he said might not be true. I'm like, probably drop the might.
instead of accepting everything at face value, question the validity of information, especially when it affects your beliefs and decisions.
Yeah.
Avoid misinformation. In a world saturated with information, not everything we hear or see is the truth. Being skeptical helps in discerning truth from falsehood. Inner voice. The agreement emphasizes the importance of listening to one's inner voice or intuition. While it's crucial to be skeptical of external information, it's equally vital to trust and listen to that voice within. Mindful listening. Listening doesn't just involve the ears, it's about being present and paying attention with an open heart and mind. Avoid assumptions. I won't go into that because we talked about that today. Personal freedom, we've talked a lot about that. And balance, growth and evolution. Yeah, so that's it. That's the fifth agreement. I just love it. Challenge beliefs, question everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be
And look,
skeptical, but do learn to listen. But when you listen, don't just listen with your mind, listen with your heart.
yes. Yes. With your emotional wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah. I would add to that, look around. I think someone said to me like, this world is just more divided than ever. And I'm like, I'm looking around over here. I'm talking to my neighbors. I'm interacting with different people. I'm hearing different perspectives, so I just look around. I think I would also add to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And question. I love it. So the last thing I want to say about, and thank you for bringing up the fifth agreement, the fourth agreement, is he does talk about death at the end of the book and the four agreements.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah. And I'm a big fan of this. It sounds a little morose, but I am a
I'm
big fan of
death.
I'm a big fan of death. Recognizing that it is a real part of our experience on this earth. It will come get us all. And I have lived with this as a practice for many, many, many years, in recognizing and sitting with the knowing that this existence over here will come to an end. And one of my teachers one time said, I was perseverating on something and worrying about something. And he said, if I put a plastic bag over your head and sealed it off, I bet you would stop worrying about that thing. I said, yeah, you're probably right. It's like the only thing that would be important to you right then would be your next breath. And I'm like, it was a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to use the word aggressive, but it was a very like in my face example,
Yeah.
of like, yeah, you're right. And he said, so keep some perspective around that and just remember, what's important. So I want to bring that up because he does talk about that at the end of the book. And I have this, it's sitting behind, it's on the wall back there, but sort of this life calendar. And it came from the website Wait But Why. You can find it. This guy's a great writer, but he basically takes from year 0 all the way through year 89.
Uh-oh, I think we've lost Daphne, or you all have lost me. So I'm not sure which, if it's me or if it's Daphne, but I will monologue for just a moment. But Daphne was telling us about her calendar. And if I'm not mistaken, she has a calendar that goes all the way. It sounds like it's age 89. And once you get to I think it's broken down by weeks, and you can cross it off and check a little box or exit for each of those weeks as they go by. And as you go on in age and you look to see, you kind of get a visual clue as to how much time you have left with these things, given the average age, I guess, of whatever that is for those individuals. So Daphne just dropped off. Hopefully she is going to be able to reset her internet, reconnect here in just a moment, and we'll get her back on in just a moment. But I definitely want to encourage you, if you haven't read The Four Agreements, this would be a book that would be a great read this weekend. So Daphne, welcome back. And you had just left off we heard you say there are a calendar with 89 weeks.
Yeah.
Or years.
Yes. So each square is a week of your life, and you can see where you were from year 0, 52 weeks, and then you can see where you were year 1, 2. So I have checked off, I'm in year 53, and each week I go in and check off a square. So what's nice is I can see how much time is theoretically left, because we never know it's going to come to an end. And it's just a great it helps for me, it helps me calibrate. It
Yeah.
calibrates my expectations and calibrates sort of my priorities and what I'm paying attention to at different times. Not perfectly.
There are a couple of thoughts that I have on this whole thing of death.
Mm,
Number one, I love the idea of stoicism and momentum mori,
yeah.
which
Me too.
is remember you are going to die. You
Yes.
know, that just remember that.
Yes.
So I just love to be reminded of the fact that I'm a mortal being. I also love to remind myself that I'm not guaranteed that 89 years.
Yeah.
I recently, was talking with somebody who has received some news that are there may be much shorter time span left than they had anticipated, and that news just came in
Mm,
earlier this week. And this person was rightfully upset based upon where they are about the thoughts on that and their expectations and anticipation. And the interesting thing is that really the guarantee of how many years one has to live prior to that diagnosis and then after that diagnosis, the guarantee has not changed.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it's like, so the question is what are you gonna do with the moment you have, which is only ever now? And so there's a lot of that I think about.
Hmm.
I'm often reminded of Steve Jobs' 2005 commencement address.
Yes.
One of my favorite quotes of all time. He said this. He says, "Listen, I get up every morning and I look in the mirror and I ask myself this question: if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm going to do today? And when the answer is no, too many days in a row, then I know it's time to change." And I love that, but just the whole thing, just the and also I think there was one more allusion. I think I'm using the right word, but there was one more reference to death in his thing, and of course he had already had cancer and had
Yeah.
surgery, and of course he had died. After it had come back and he did pass away, but yet I just remember really being impacted by that,
Yeah.
and believe it or not, I thinking about death a lot has really helped me come to an acceptance of death as a part of life
Mhm.
and something that I have no fear of anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And
it is a
and
real thing.
then and then this is just a personal belief. Sorry, I had swallowed the wrong way. I don't believe that I will die.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is the essence of who I am, I will not die. Now, physically, this body will pass and my representation here on this planet will pass. But my friend Dan Miller and mentor recently passed back in January of this year. And he still influences me every day today. And I still hear his voice. I still hear his counsel. I still feel his compassion. He is as alive to me in essence today as when he was still physically here in in the body that I used to refer to as Dan Miller. And so it's Dan's not the only person. He's just somebody. He's the most recent person in my life that's passed.
Yeah.
But so for me, I do love the idea of death. I think contemplating death and recognizing it and accepting it and not fearing it is something. Coming to that place of not fearing it is an incredibly valuable pursuit. At least it has been for me.
Yeah. It has been for me too. And it fits in with that deep, deep truth of the impermanence of everything. So, I think that's probably why I'm so drawn to that, is that if you really can get with nothing is permanent, nothing,
Yeah.
you really can get that truth. And then recognizing, like, I'm not the people around me that I love and care about, in this iteration, I would say, as far as I'm aware, will not be permanent either. So how can that inform my choices? How can it inform my life now and going forward? And it's been very helpful to me. So for what it's worth.
I love it.
All right.
Daphne, great book. Wonderful to have two conversations back to back about this thing. I was telling folks when you had dropped off and your internet had bounced for you that if they have not read this book, I would encourage you to go this weekend and read it.
Yes. Yes. And you can do it easily in a weekend for sure.
Yep.
Putting it into practice will take you longer than a weekend.
All right. Call to action.
Yes, call to action. So I want to just call people to our show here, to the podcast. I want to remind people that they can reach out to us with questions. They can reach out to us with comments. And if they go to the show notes, they will see the link in there to do so. So we would love to hear from you and interact with you. We're obviously open to any questions you may have, and to your thoughts and opinions too. I'm sure you have them. So we're 19 shows in now, I think. So
Yes, I think this is
yeah.
episode 19.
19. Yeah. So I really wanted to put that as a call to action. Engage with us, drop us a line, let us hear your questions. And if there's anything you'd love to hear us talk about on the show, we are completely open to doing so.
I love it. Very sweet. My call to action here at the end is I have a opening keynote address called All Beliefs Have Consequences. And
Oh,
so we talk about the fact that many of these beliefs that kind of determine how we experience life, they're unconscious. We're not aware of them. In the opening keynote address of the Free the Dream conference, I talked about the fact that these beliefs are adopted when we were kids, many of them throughout our young adult life, and we just pick them up. We don't know what they are. And in this talk, I teach 4 valuable lessons. Number 1, how to discover what your unconscious beliefs are so that they become conscious. Number 2, how to discover the source of those beliefs so that you understand they are not yours, and you can actually let them go just as quickly as you pick them up. Number 3, I'll teach you the process of how to disassociate, how to remove that belief from your operating system, from your subconscious mind. And of course, it's absolutely essential that you learn the 4th step, which is how to condition an empowering alternative belief. This is available for free at mindsetanswerman.com/free. By the way, if you sign up for that, you will be in my automated email newsletter. But here's the situation. You're going to get an email like 24 hours later saying, did you get what I promised? Because there's a big promise at mindsetanswerman.com/free. And it's going to give you the opportunity to buy the Free the Dream online course for $197.
yeah.
But I don't want you to buy it. Here's why.
Of course.
I want you to email me, cliff@cliffravenscraft.com, and put free course in the subject line. If I go in and see that you have signed up for this All Beliefs Have Consequences talk at mindsetanswerman.com/free, I will go in and I will grant you free access to the full course.
This is a no-brainer.
You
And the course is great. I know,
Thank
because
you.
I was there.
were there
I was there.
when it was recorded live in front
Yes,
of
it
a
was.
live studio audience.
Yes, it was. All right. Well, the 4 agreements, and take the calls to action.
Yes. And until next time, we encourage you to choose your own adventure.